slightly. Right. Coach Helen for YouFit Studio. Now, how am I going to be talking about sphere of influence? So what is in your sphere of influence? Okay. Now, I feel like I say like a warning, like one of those things like, please be warned, this life may contain the following things. Slightly ranty things, potentially. And also, you might recognise some of your own behaviours in this. Not a criticism, always an observation of human behaviour is what I would say. And as I come accustomed, I like to explain why I'm choosing a topic to talk about on a live or an episode, because it's usually become part of a topic of conversation I've had with clients. Okay. Now, sphere of influence is potentially call it that, or you can call it control. Now, lots of people want more control over their situation right now. So that might be environmental, financial, physical movement, even like a lot of control. They want more control over what they have. And you like it to spheres of influence. So there's things inside the sphere of influence and things outside of that, right? I'm going to talk about a couple of them and where they sit and why, and certain things that get picked up of. Now, I haven't necessarily gone into depth of each of these because I think as I go along, we'll kind of get some idea of this, right? One of the things that came out of this conversation, I'm very honest, as always, about the sphere of influence, and it's become no more prudent than some of the behaviours around even kind of thinking about vaccinations, right? So the sphere of influence is someone wants to gain control, so they will call their doctors on a daily basis to get hold of their vaccine, because they feel that's in it should be in their sphere of influence and in their control, and therefore take action to try and make it become part of their influence by contacting their local surgery for their vaccine, even if they're not due for several months. Right, okay. Now that's a prime example, or not the only example I'm going to touch on today, obviously. There's other situations to look at, where somebody's trying to look at their sphere of influence, they're fighting it, and they're trying to push the boundaries of that influence outside from fear, etc., or motivation, right? So some of the things, right, that are not, or that we want, okay, let me rephrase that. These are things that are not in our sphere of influence, right? So these things I'm about to go through first are not, N-O-T, within our sphere of influence, okay? So the first one, other people's ideas. Like my ideas are really not like, you may disagree or agree with me, right? I'm sure some people will, people love disagreeing with me throughout some of this life, which is fair enough, right? But other people's ideas are not within our sphere of influence. Now this might include people in your close family, right? If you're trying to influence them into your way of thinking about food and health, right? Let's bring it back into that remit. So if you're actually wanting your entire family to get on board, I see that a lot. There's a first rush of, wow, I can lose weight. This is fantastic. Everyone needs to eat like me. I'm so good. Yeah, this is great, right? However, other people's ideas and approaches to nutrition are not going to match yours, or to training, etc., or being active. And therefore, you cannot make somebody's ideas part of your sphere of influence, right? You'll never, and you know, see the thing, you'll never, what is this saying? Cannot meet eye to eye, right? And that's the principle, that somebody else's ideas are never going to be within your sphere of influence. You cannot control that or change that for purely your own behaviours and your responses, right? What else is not within our sphere of influence? Other people's behaviours. Now, I could do a whole life just on that in the last 12 months. And I don't think I need to. I think immediately all like this, yes, those people that do that, right? And I think we're all quite capable of doing that. We're all quite capable of looking at other people's behaviours and very quick to say, you know what, that's not what I would do. I wouldn't do this, I wouldn't do that, etc. However, that's not within our sphere of influence, right? So we can spend a lot of time either emotionally or sometimes in our behaviours, wanting to somehow influence other people's behaviours and getting very little response, right? Let's be honest. It's like shouting into a fan. Use that saying a couple of times over the last month or so. You cannot change somebody else's behaviours. It's not within your sphere of influence to do so, right? You cannot change somebody else's behaviours. You look after your own, right? We'll get on to, but you cannot change somebody else's behaviours. Now, whether that's to do, again, with food, with general movement, right? If any description of which I'm sure you can draw the lines between, right? You cannot control somebody else's behaviors, right? Other people's actions, right? Other people's actions are different to their behaviors. So behaviors is something they do on a regular basis, right? You might be in, you think you want to, is outside of your sphere of influence that you want it to be. Other people's actions are similar, right? One-off, but bizarre in your head action that you can't make head or tail if you don't understand, right? You cannot influence that. That is not within your sphere of influence, right? You cannot control if, let's say this is a good one, if you're in a household of people all on a similar path, right? Let's just take that scenario. You're all on a similar path for weight loss, etc. There's group of like 5 or 6 of you, and the one person just decides, no, I'm eating pizza tonight. Screw you all, I'm eating pizza. You can't control that action, or you would want to, right? You say, no, don't, come on. You can't control someone's actions, right? You can't make that within your sphere of influence. Those actions are that person's individually, and they're responsible for. Same thing as you say, right? It's my responsibility to do X, Y, Z. Again, I'll get onto that. You cannot take control or create somebody else's actions as part of your sphere of influence. Here's a good one. Consequences of somebody else's actions, right? Let's use the same scenario, right? That person in your household, like, oh, we're a tight group. What do you mean you're eating pizza? Right? What's the consequences of somebody's actions if they decide, I don't know, to eat pizza every night? They will gain weight, right? You cannot control, or it's not within your sphere of influence to manage, deal with, try and change the consequences of somebody else's behaviours. Can you see where I'm going here, right? Don't worry, I'm going to keep going, right? What else is not in your sphere of influence? Other people's beliefs, right? Other people's beliefs are not within your sphere of influence. You cannot change someone's belief system or bring it into line with your own. Ultimately, again, you can spend a lot of time trying to change someone's belief around a particular thing in life, right, and not get anywhere. Why? Because it's not actually meant to be within your sphere of influence. Similarly, other people's mistakes, right? Other people's mistakes are not for you to be responsible for or to control. Or other people's words, right, also not in your sphere of influence. Now, those are 8 in total, or 7 actually, 7 different areas of things that are not within our sphere of influence or control, and yet we like to think we can expand that to take that into our control. Now, why might I be bringing this up? Because all of these things take an inordinate, I just say a large amount of time. All these things can actually swallow a large percentage of your time if you try to expand your sphere of influence. Now, if it's meant to be this big, right, and it's like it's rigid elastic, right, it doesn't really go anywhere, but you're still trying to push against it. Now, the mental exertion it takes to actually try and push that sphere of influence out to control these things is exhausting, by the way. Now, lots of people don't realise how exhausting it is unless they've been doing it for a large amount of time. Say for like, I don't know, in some cases 12 months, right? However, sounds ridiculous, and yet if you think about it, we've all probably at some point, including myself, I'm going to put my hand up, both hands up, throw them in all at once, we've been pushing the boundary of the sphere of influence to bring those things in, because we generally think that we are either in the right or we are meant to be able to control that influence or be able to control that person's behaviours. Now, the reality, right? The reality of what is within our own sphere of influence. Well, all the opposite to some degree, if you like. So what's within my own sphere of influence or your own sphere of influence? Well, your own ideas, right? Your own behaviours, your own actions, right? Owning the consequences of your actions, whether they're positive or destructive, right? Being responsible for those and taking entirely that responsibility, right? Means that you're also in control of your own belief system, whether to challenge your own belief system, right? And maybe move the circle of your own influence, right, around yourself, not somebody else, but around yourself. You're responsible for your own mistakes. Those mistakes are in your sphere of influence, how you word it and name it. You're responsible for your own words, how you talk to others, and importantly, how you speak to yourself. So you're responsible for all those things. All those things are within your own sphere of influence, right? You're not responsible for anybody else's. Now, the reality is, if we spent as much time thinking about our own sphere of influence and how we can expand it, change it, develop it, nurture it, right? Hey Nazreen, look at it in a different way. We would be far more further progressed in whatever we're looking at, whether it is for health and fitness, whether it is for personal development, etc. However, what I tend to see is, and I'm going to be honest, through the means of the old social media, granted I'm on social media right now, so I fully appreciate the irony of this, through the means of social media, looking to change, right, or impact somebody else's sphere of influence through their own. And by that I mean that's either posting something controversial or challenging somebody else's belief system in that sense, right? Well, ultimately the main focus is about ourselves, right? Not what other people are doing, what other people are saying, how other people are behaving, how other people are dealing with the situation. Our main focus really, if you want to look at real progression and everything you're trying to achieve, is looking at yourself and looking at what you're responsible for. Like all these things you are responsible for, nobody else. While we keep pushing that onto somebody else, we are removing the focus, right? So if I could spend my whole day, right, which I'm not saying I will, theoretically, all right, and have seen this as well, I could go, or a client may go for a whole day trawling through Facebook, looking at posts where people are doing things I don't agree with, and spending a lot of my mental energy then making a post myself, like, oh my god, I can't believe this, I can't believe that, right? It's amazing how many hours of the day, of the week, of the month, you may find yourself doing that with very little reward. The amount of time and the focus and energy you put into posting into social media to try and change somebody else's sphere of influence, you could be sending that focus internally to yourself and about ways that you could develop your different ways of speaking to yourself, your own actions, the way you could develop plans to avoid mistakes, your ideas, right, your development. It's amazing how, and I'll admit this, I think sometimes, and this is a personal copyright, this is a personal opinion, always says personal opinion, right? I do think that actually we can waste so much time doing that, and if we turn that in, the development we'd see would be twofold. However, it's a lot easier to look outside ourselves, to distract from working on ourselves, than it is actually to work, if that makes sense. Like, it's easier to look outside and say, well, this person's doing that and that's wrong, it's against my belief system, shouldn't be doing that, shouldn't be doing this, whatever it is in life, right? And I know it's like me trying to avoid saying what it really is, right? But we all know examples over the last 12 months we've been doing that, whether it's health and fitness or personal, as I said, environmental. It's easier to look outside ourselves and go, that person's doing something wrong, then look at our own behaviours and our own actions and say, okay, actually, no, I take responsibility for my own food, my own training, right? I'm going to use those examples, or anything else, right? It's easier to look outside ourselves than actually turn it inwards and say, actually, what can I do that can change my outcomes, or how I want to view my life, my words, my actions, my mistakes, my ideas, right? All of it. So I'm not asking you to change the world here, right? Maybe what I'm asking you to do actually is to take on board this consideration next time you find yourself looking to change somebody else's behaviours, or looking to use words either to yourself or externally to somebody else to say, you know, that person needs to be doing this or needs to be that, or shouldn't be doing that, shouldn't be doing that. You know, actually the first person we need to be looking at and actually spending our time focusing on is ourselves, right? I had who the best person say it? This is kind of in line, kind of not, in a little bit. Some people will say the most important person is their significant other, right? Or in some cases their kids, right? Now, I completely understand that. Also, another client who has got kids actually say to me, do you know the most important person on the planet is myself? And me. And I look to myself. I hold myself accountable. Because if I do that and work on myself, then I'm more available to other people. You know, that's the principle. If you spend your whole life looking to other people and changing their behaviours and their words and everything else, you will actually leave yourself behind, right? You won't have got to the development, you won't see what you're capable of, or even develop that, because you spent a lot of time looking at other people's behaviours and not your own, right? Leave you with that one, right? But I won't, because I'll do a recap. Obviously, this for those that joined a little bit later on. So why was it doing this live? Because there's been a lot of questions about what people are in control of, right? Or what's within their sphere of influence, or what they can influence themselves, right, and what is outside. And sometimes that gets blurred. I think people generally, I think they can encompass everything. They think they have the ability to change other people's own influences, and the reality is we can't, right? So things that you cannot or are not within your own sphere of influence is other people's ideas, other people's behaviors, right, other people's actions, other people's consequences of actions, other people's beliefs, other people's mistakes, and other people's words. None of this is anything that we can influence, right? What we can influence is all of those things that we're doing ourselves. So how we approach our own ideas and how we use them, develop them, ignore them, etc., etc. Our own behaviours, right? What we do ourselves, right? And by that I mean behaviours as regular things. Other people's actions. So how we react to a situation, that is our own responsibility, right? As much as not somebody else's, right? Consequences of your own actions or habits or behaviours, right? Equally. Your own beliefs, right? That's definitely your own sphere of influence. Your own mistakes, right? Or learning curves, let's call them that, right, where we call them. And your own words. These are all within your sphere of influence and all can have a massive impact on yourself. What you can't impact and influence is people outside of that. So if we spend more time focusing on all those things ourselves and less time trying to expand our sphere of influence to kind of swallow everybody else and all their things they're doing, we'd actually also be slightly happier because we'd be able to progress forward in life rather than keep looking to other people and their behaviours. So yeah, that's me done on that one. As always, if you've got something to say, like, you know, by all means, comment, hit us up, join us for a bit of fun by joining the party. I've put the Revamp28 is back on. So if you want to have a bit of sample of what else we do, we work with clients around health, fitness, mental agility, all the rest of it. Come and find out. Wednesday I'm doing junk food. I'm just going to sit here and eat junk food. That'd be amazing. Imagine. They're what I have these days. Pretty stunt being sick on a life. However, I'm going to be talking about junk food and why we get so into it and why it's so lovely. And then later in the week, I'll be talking about fasting. People ask a lot of questions about fasting, so join me for that one. In the meantime, again, think about your own sphere of influence. What can you control? Whatever you call it. What language you want to use. And what can you not? Right? How much energy are you willing to put out on somebody else's behaviours and words, as opposed to understanding that you can influence your own more, right? So thinker. All right. Have a lovely evening, guys, and I will see you all again on Wednesday.